for the last 3 years at Insight 222, we've been conducting our People Analytics Trend Survey, in fact, since 2020. And every year we ask a question, where is people analytics adding the most value in your organization? We give people a whole list of topics to choose from. And for the last 3 years, good catch, for the last 3 years, DEI has been top of the areas where people analytics is adding value. But the climate around DEI has been changing a little bit, particularly I think here in the US. So what we're going to talk about really on the panel today is how to focus on practical data-driven approaches to advancing DEI while navigating some of the challenges that are around. There is always challenges with DEI, but it's just some of those have come to the fore a little bit at the moment. Well, we're going to start off on the positive. We're going to look at opportunities. So we're going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit around where they see the current and main opportunities. So Alan and Sujatha, you're both obviously from S&P Global. So I'm going to ask you together because you'll explain in a minute the sort of different perspectives and areas that you're working in. And we're going to really explore the close working relationship between people analytics and DEI teams as well as one of the key partnerships. So whichever one of you wants to take this, where do you see the current main opportunities for applying people analytics to DEIB topics?
Absolutely. Thanks. Can you guys hear me? Just coming in. Hello.
Can we hear Alan?
Do you want to go first?
I can go.
Yeah, why don't you go?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sujatha Zafar. Thank you so much for having me. I kind of feel special being the DEI person at a People Analytics conference. So this is a first for me. So I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I run DEI for S&P Global, and I work very closely with my partner, Alan, who's head of our People Analytics. So we have a great partnership. I think for me, where I see a lot of where we're working closely and really collaborating and gaining value is that we've started seeing there's so much talk around data and there's so much noise around data. It's what Alan has really helped me do is looking at that data holistically, looking to see where there are opportunities. Not everything in DEI is about representation. So looking much more holistically to see where are opportunities, David? What can we see trends? Where can we use lag and lead indicators to sort of make new, interesting decisions, choices? And then, all of us, we had a few minutes to chat before, we were saying data is great, but without narrative, without collaboration from different viewpoints to actually understand that data, and particularly when we're talking about, human data, about our people, you're dicing and slicing all this data. How are we actually thinking about it? How are we using it to make some real changes, to look holistically at things? So that's where Alan's help and expertise and advice has really helped me. It's helped me navigate a lot of really complex issues. I always laugh and tease him and say, he's like Switzerland. He brings the data. There's no, this is like right or wrong or good or bad. He's showing it to me and helping me and many others look at this data and say, okay, how do we now use it to tell a story, to move something, to change something, to make policy decisions? So that's where I find the best partnership that's sort of evolved from this. And that's why I'm here really to show you that this is something that's really working for us. And it's an interesting way of partnering and working together because it's had a massive impact on the way we look at DEI at S&P Global. Alan?
I'm going to continue to not have my mic on so Sujatha can say all of those wonderful things. I would just double down on one major point about storytelling. We try to make sure DEI has an impact by thinking about it as a part of organizational health. So if we have an idea of what we want to become and understand all of these factors, and DEI can be a major part of that, giving that lens that a leader, someone that we have to be really careful in how we talk about it, we can couch it in the right structure of, are there risks? What is our organizational setup going to be? What is the experience of our people as they go through the people journey? And that, I think, has given really, really strong benefit for Sujatha to then go out and engage, whether we're together, whether we're apart, we have the same consistent story that we can engage through.
Yeah.
Chris, I'll come to you next, and then we'll go across the pond to Christina afterwards. So, Chris, introduce yourself, and where do you think people analytics can be applied best to DEIB topics?
Yeah, thanks, David, and for supporting this and setting this up. So I'm Chris Arasoli. I'm one of the senior associate directors, kind of leading the charge for people analytics for side of our business. And I've got some of my rock star colleagues in here with me today. So I would just kind of build on what Alan and Sujatha were saying. I think the biggest opportunity here, it's not data. It's giving the business a way to think in this space. Because in a lot of cases, they haven't touched it, they haven't thought about it. It's not their primary area of expertise or even their primary charge. I mean, they're business leaders. They've got to run a business. And so I think the big opportunity is it's not basics, but it's reframing. How do you think about DEI in your workplace? And how do you bring data to bear to have maybe not data-driven, but data-informed decisions
Data-informed,
we've had it before? And so I think I make it sound simple, but it's a tall order. Because what you have to do in people analytics, you have to be good at providing insights about your metrics across the talent lifecycle, from hire to selection, advancement, sentiment, and turnover. You've got to be good at that because I think the opportunity areas is stop talking about DEI data. That sounds really controversial, so I'll say it again. We don't talk about DEI data. What we do is we get the business hungry, hooked, using the HR KPIs across the talent lifecycle, and we look at them through a DEI lens. And kind of what I was suggesting in the session yesterday on simplicity is I don't want the data to be the movie itself. I want it to be the lens through which they see the movie of their business. And so we want to give them something. I always want to go to what's good or bad. What good or bad is, look, I don't want turnover to be high. I don't want sentiment to be low or in the crapper. That happens sometimes. What I do want is in the US, your gender, your race, ethnicity, your disability status, your veteran status, globally, your gender and others. I don't want that to impact on any of those metrics, your experience, your opportunity. And that's the question. So we actually have easy benchmarks there, but it's built on top of stuff where they're doing. So again, I think that opportunity, kind of what you're saying towards that org health and everything is, we've got to give them a framework. We've got to be teachers and consultants or the data analysts.
And Christina, same question to you. Please introduce yourself in your role, and where do you see the current main opportunities for applying people analytics in the DEI space?
So hi, I'm the European one out here. I'm representing Danfoss, a Danish company. However, we are global, have 6,000 in the US, but it's not our main place, basically. And my name is Christina. I'm heading up people data, people reporting, and people analytics in this global company. So I have a little bit of everything. My team is also responsible for the crappy data, which is not crappy coming in. We're responsible for all the insights reporting, and we are responsible for the advanced analytics. So it all comes to me when there's something to complain about. And I'm just really happy to be here at this panel. So thank you for that opportunity. Two things. So I fully agree with my other panelist. Partnership, which translates into action. So if we have cool data, insights, whatever, if it's not bringing some concrete action, we don't really want to do it. So we wanted to be able to, now we show you this, please go and change that policy in this area. Now we show you this, please go and correct then that. So that's what we really want. And for me, without hopefully being branded too much on that one topic, for me, really a key main focus have been compensation equity. And the reason for that, I think it's so cool when you can see your analytics translate into real change, real fast after. So I just know whenever we correct the salary, like we made a real change in the world. And in my function, we also do a lot of changes like org changes, back and forth, helping the company. And of course, that's important. But this is like when I'm looking myself in the mirror, I feel really good that we did this. Like I feel like we really did a positive thing in the world as such. So that makes me proud and my team proud. And every time we do corrections, we have like, yay, that's awesome. So that's, I think, one kind of example and place. If you're not already doing it, you could start. And the analytics in that space is pretty simple compared to other areas. So you can actually pretty easily get started and do a lot of value quick, both for your organization, but also for the people, which of course goes together.
I think it's a really great example of where you can get from insight to action to outcome quite quickly, in the compensation space. So we're going to talk about a couple of areas now around navigating legal complexity without necessarily getting into specifics, but certainly some generic guidance here, and then privacy, which I guess is related to that. So Chris, starting with you, what guidance would you offer practitioners in the room and maybe listening to the video afterwards on ways to navigate new legislation and regulation with regards to DEI. Bit of a big topic, I appreciate, but
Yeah, so it's a great idea. I mean, it's something we're all facing. Like these are headwinds that we're all trying to fly into. And so I think of one general piece of advice for consideration, and then specifically for that. I found it's useful for me and the partners I work with, as we're doing this work, to keep in mind there's two camps of people you're going to be consulting with. Whether you're stakeholders, HR business partners, business, or whatever, they're going to be one or two camps. They're either just curious about what's going on and want to make a difference wherever the date of the conversation goes, or they have some sort of agenda. Not necessarily a bad one, right? Advancing women in leadership, getting early career talent to be more diverse. But this second group, for better or worse, whatever data you provide them, they are going to confirmation bias. They are going to look at the ones that confirm to their agenda and ignore the data points that don't. At best, they become people who just want to push their own agenda. At worst, they push something that's obstructionist and flies in the face of data. So if you have data that shows you actually have really good representation of female leadership, and they're 100% sold on programs for upskilling female leaders, you're going to have a quiet resistor, or maybe not so quiet. So I always think about that framework. Keep that in mind. You don't have to say it to anyone, but keep it in mind. Try to figure out who you're dealing with. So towards the legal side, proactivity. Your legal partners should be the first people you bring in as early as anything, before anything. They're not the people you go to ask for forgiveness or permission. They're the people who constructively help you. I will tell you, as we've had partners, I've been at Berger now for 4.5 years, and before this I had partners. I can't tell you how much I've learned from them. And I can tell you that even us in HR, I'll say, for most of us, I believe, we don't see the threats our organizations face. We don't see them. There are adversary counsel will pick up on anything. So for example, I'm always in the back of my head, I have a second gear running. So if there's a recording of this, anything that potentially an adversary counsel who wants to bring charges against our team for whatever reason through a discovery process, they can get that. If I'm going to put something on a slide, if I'm going to say it, and the word choices matter. So are we driving decisions with data or informing decisions with data, as Sujatha said before? So I'd say those legal partners, do what you do best as a consultant. Get in their sphere. Be a friend to them. Be with them before you ask them for anything, and just have regular touch bases, because they need to know how you think to trust you. Another thing I'll just say, and I'll pass it over. It took a lot of time to change our legal partners' idea around risk. The safest planes never fly. The safest rockets never take off. The safest coal mines don't run. But we value air flight. We value flying in planes. We value rockets that will eventually take us further and further. We value coal mines because when you flip that switch, a lot of your electricity comes from that. We mitigate risk. And it takes a lot of time to change our internal counsel, who get credit only for knocking down potential targets, to give them credit, to find a way to get them credit to say yes to things, because they don't get credit for saying yes in a lot of cases.
And Christina, same question to you, but other than, obviously having a really close partnership with your legal counsel, your legal team, what other advice would you offer around, managing through regulatory and legislation changes?
So I think, as mentioned before, and many of your organizations probably are, but we are truly global. We're present in more than 55 countries and have 42,000 worldwide. So the way we are organized around it is that we have a global team where we have legal, we have finance, we have myself, so we have like different representation, looking at globally what are we reporting and how, and our annual report and all those things. And then we work very closely with our legal and local HR partners, because we can't stay on top of, okay, maybe now US is a big market, but we're also in Canada, we're in Brazil, we're in India, so how is all of these different? And it's different everywhere. So I would say have maybe a global team with good key partners in with the right capabilities. Work closely with the local ones. That's at least what we are doing. And then thirdly, we are actually considering bringing in external partners, because there's getting more and more regulations. And it's just getting really hard for us, at least, to be on top of every single country that we're navigating in. What exactly do we need to report? How exactly are we going to slice it for this or for that? And here we're talking this and that. So it's a consideration we're currently making in order for us to just be compliant, because it's very important for us to be compliant. Like, we really need to be that.
And Sujatha, Alan, Ian.
Who's Ian?
Any other sort of guidance that you would offer? Maybe Sujata, if you want to go first.
Sure. It's so heartening. I don't know. I hope you guys are feeling the same way. Listening to people who are going through some of the same things that we are, right? Everything what Chris said resonated. Everything Christina is saying about being a global firm. We are in 43 different countries. We are 40,000 people strong. DEI doesn't begin and end and die in the US, right? We've got people all over the world who are incredibly vested in amazing things that we're doing. So I think, Chris, a lot of what you said is so important, that partnership ideal. So Alan, obviously, we use data to help us show things, to bring things to our legal counsel. Our legal counsel, Alan and I will both say, is one of our dearest friends as well. So we are going to her for advice. We talk to her. She advises us on all sorts of things we want to try. Sometimes we want to be a little, like, let's push this a little bit and see. We talk about the risks. I really feel like we have a partner. I say, without your legal person in your company, you cannot do this work now. It is too risky without that. External counsel is a great idea. I think it can bring a wonderful perspective in areas that we don't have expertise. CSRD, lots of things are coming. There's lots of new regulation coming in the US. For big companies like ours, voluntary reporting, so Alan helps us a lot with our reporting, and I'm very proud of our company. We voluntarily report a lot of data. We have a DEI report, we have an impact report. Please look it up, it's on our website. It's cool to see the kinds of things that we're putting out there. But now it's all going to become mandatory very soon. A lot of things are going, especially in Europe and in other areas. So what does that mean, right? So you do need good legal partners. You need good comms partners. If you don't have, so we keep talking this thread about a story, that how do you talk about this stuff? Again, fraught with danger in terms of how you say something. You're recorded somewhere, slide is put somewhere. What you think you're so innocently putting out to share something can turn very quickly. So I don't say this with a thing of you have to be paranoid and you can't move and you have to be, just sort of terrified about every word you say, because it goes back to that first thing that Chris started. It's buy-in. For us, we talk about this a lot. Leadership buy-in, your exco, what do they want? Where do they see the direction of the company? Yes, we have our ways of talking about this, what we want, but as a company from senior leadership, you need buy-in. You need what their appetite for risk is. Some companies put out public goals. Some companies don't. Some companies, say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z and do all these things. Some companies won't. It doesn't mean one company is better or bad, because you can say all that and not deliver on anything, right? So it's great to put out goals and not deliver. I'd rather be modest and do the work and make sure that when we come out, we have something to show. So Alan, I don't know how you feel about this, but so many of our conversations are, hey, are you going to be speaking to this person? Put this idea in their head, see how they're coming. Yeah?
It's a partnership.
It's
right?
partnership, yeah.
We really try to play off each other in those efforts. I would add one more thing: having a good partnership with your controller. Yeah. I don't know if I would have said that 2, 3, 4 months ago. Yeah, but right now, their rigor, their detail, and how they do financial disclosures, well, they're your best partner in making sure things are compliant, effective, controlled, right, from a risk and audit perspective. Yeah. They know how to play with this data. Maybe not DEI specific, but they know how to play with some of the most critical data that you publish, especially in public companies, to the street. So that has been eye-opening to me. And they can be, sometimes maybe you might have not thought of them as collaborative, but they are deeply collaborative. And we have an outstanding partner in the finance organization.
Yes, we do.
So Christina, moving to you, so moving from legal and then regulatory to privacy, how do you balance the desire for driving change through DEI and DEI data with employee privacy and data protection?
Yeah. So Cole Napper gave a really great example yesterday. And he said, so who wins a race? He told it more funny than I will. So yeah. Anyways, I'll try to convey the point, but not necessarily the funniness of what he said. But basically, you have a race. Somebody collects a lot of data. Somebody doesn't collect any data. Who wins? And basically, what he was meaning was in the US, you collect all kinds of data. Like you collect ethnicity, you collect maybe sexual orientation. In the Europe, it's illegal to ask those questions. What you can do is that you can ask people to self-identify. So you can give the opportunity to, put in your data here and there if you want to. But then there's a big cultural barrier. So just to give an example, so in Denmark, I'm from Denmark, and Denmark is very progressive when it comes to sexual orientation. So it was the first country in the world to make it legal to actually, have a same-sex partner. We're very, very progressive. But if you ask somebody to self-identify their sexuality, like nobody would. It would be such an off. It would be like, my sexuality is private. Like who I love, how's that a concern of Danfoss? Like it would be so off. So just putting out even the possibility would be off, if you know what I mean, right? So I think that's just something to consider, because now in an American context, there are really these cultural differences. But overall, a few key pointers is like the basic. Ensure that the data you're collecting have a purpose. Ensure you're actually going to do something with it. Ensure that you're always aggregating data, best practice, so that you're not disclosing anything. Ensure that you're fully compliant, security-wise. Ensure you have consent, and that you are communicating clearly. So what we are doing is we have very transparent DE&I goals. Like all our employees can constantly go into the same dashboards as our leadership and see how we're progressing on everything. So we're we're trying to bring everybody quite close to say, this is what we're doing with your data. Like, do you want to see if you're progressing? Do you want to see if your leader is progressing? Here you go, more or less, right? That's a little bit tough, but like your leader, they can see the department's progression, and then they know who the leader are there, right? So, yeah. So that's a bit of thoughts, general, but I think this difference is just interesting, at least to me. It's very different perspectives.
No, really interesting to understand the complexity. Obviously, in a multinational company, you've got different attitudes to privacy and transparency around particularly this sort of data in different areas. So I'm conscious of a few topics we want to cover. So I'm just going to say to Chris and Sujatha and Alan, is there anything you'd like to add to what Christina said about privacy there? Or
She nailed it.
Yeah,
I
did think
merits all around.
Yeah, I did think that. So I want to give some time for audience questions as well, but I want to talk about stakeholders and leaders in particular. We'll explore the partnership, I think, particularly with Alan and Sujatha on people analytics and DEI, and then we're going to talk about DEI metrics as well. So let's start with stakeholders. So I'll come to you, Chris, on this first. How do you engage leaders and other key stakeholders in DEI conversations?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you're not going to get uptake of anything you do in people analytics without engaged stakeholders, right? And if most of what we're trying to do is change hearts and minds, we've got to be there, and people have to want to see us to do that. I think the first thing is you build those relationships in just a normal people analytics consulting. They've got to recognize you. They've got to trust you. They've got to believe that, just normally speaking, you're bringing data that are valid. They've got to understand those expectations. We value progress over perfection, directionality over precision. They've got to get kind of used to you seeing you that way. And then you start to, and once they see that, then you can start to bring in the DEI stuff to the table. And because I think it's how we do this, many of the leaders who we were just trying to change decisions, any people-related business decisions, over a couple of years, and we started doing that with DEI data. So we had credibility when we came to the table, but we built that cross-functionally by having that credibility sideways with our legal team. Like you said, they're a fantastic partner. You've got to get them to trust you. All these cross-functional partners have to trust you, because where the rubber meets the road, or whatever metaphor you want to use, it's very easy for those relationships to twist and turn unexpectedly, because there's a lot of politics in this place. So you've got to get those real solid things. So that would be my suggestion. Make sure you've got tested relationships. Again, even things like know your stakeholders. Do they have kids, dogs, spouse, hobbies, whatever? Like, be able to speak on that personal level.
Christine, is there anything you'd like to add to that around before we dive into the partnership
I think
piece?
you are the partnership is here, right?
Yeah. So I think we've talked about some of the key stakeholders, obviously senior leaders, legal, privacy, Alan, you mentioned your financial controller as well. But maybe let's explore that partnership. Obviously, one of your key stakeholders when it comes to DEI is your diversity, equity, and inclusion team. So maybe let's explore that partnership a little bit. How does it work? How do you identify where to focus your priorities as well, perhaps?
So I think we've hit this a couple times, saying it's a partnership. We're deeply collaborative. We don't have any goals that supersede individual goals that supersede what we're trying to accomplish together. I think what we try to do is make sure that we are terrible. 1 + 1 = 3, right? Like, okay, but in reality, we act. Thank you, appreciate that. But we try to live and breathe that, because I can't be everywhere Suj, and I try to tee up the next things, right? Chris, you nailed it, right? We have to build that trust. So I'll bring that org health lens. I will frame everything in these concepts that are very organizationally focused. What are their outcomes? And then we can bring that lens, turn it down, and I will show certain things. It might be more data-driven, but Suj and I have talked about what that means qualitatively and quantitatively. And then when they see it, they're seeing it now a second time from a different perspective. And when we set that up, in quarterly discussions or in ad hoc challenges, they're getting both the qualitative, quantitative, and they know that we're in lockstep. And I think that is, it sounds simple, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of research together, right, in those very, very controlled environments, to then go out and say, oh, well, we want to set up a retention approach. Well, is that a problem? Is that a concern? What are you trying to do? And what's your hiring, what's your people life cycle mean to that? And Suj and I know exactly what we're talking about. What is our hiring pattern? Right? What's our promotion status? And
Bingo.
All of a sudden they're feeling really confident that Suj understands the data and I understand the context, and vice versa. And it's super powerful when that happens. Suj, did I?
You did, and you said it so nicely, but I really want to add one element here. A lot of you are people analytics experts. I think one of the things this sort of dawned on me early on was, and we had a conversation about this, is, you know what you know. I know DEI, I know how to do certain things. And the people analytics piece, I had to be humble enough to tell Alan, I don't know. The way you look at things, the way you see things, the way you see patterns and trends, in 1 second, Alan can pick something up. What I realized was he was my biggest secret weapon, right? Because you talk, Chris, I really like what you said when you're talking about, progress before perfection. I think when you're in DEI, it feels like a slog. Every day you're like trying to figure things out, and all the different bits and pieces that are coming your way. Analytics is a safe place to go to, using data, using ideas that your analytics partners bring you to see things just a little ahead of the curve, to bring that perspective to your leaders and say, hey, have you thought about this? Because I think people tend to get, very sort of backs up about DEI. This is people we're talking about, people in your organization. These are not random people that we're, sort of talking about. These are humans in our organization that we care deeply about. So what are we doing for them and making sure that our outcomes are equitable? So it's been the humility in understanding what Alan can see and what he can bring to my practice to make it more disciplined, to make it more rigorous, to up my game. So when I go into those leaders who are very, data informed and they want to, with their businesses, I'm bringing equal rigor to my practice. I'm coming with a partner who, when they say, what about this and what about that? Alan's there backing me up, right? Some of that stuff, I can't just boom, give them. But he pulls up our dashboard here, take a look at this, have you looked at this angle? So I feel when I go into these meetings, I go with a sense of, I've got partners, I've got people, I've got my peeps with me, whatever you got, I've got something back. And it's a very different and confident way of going into this. So the way we are sort of looking at a lot of our stakeholders, David, is we're working with them, sort of meeting them where they're ready, finding interesting ways to collaborate. Hey, have you thought about this? Look at these sort of, look at this data we're looking at. Maybe we should consider this. Maybe this is a different approach. And that is giving a place for conversation, not feeling like you're blocked into a corner and I have to hit certain representation numbers, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. It's a conversation. And he's allowing me to have that conversation in a very confident way because I have the data to back some of the things I'm saying. So that's, for me, a game changer, to work with a partner who's got my back in some of these really difficult conversations. You approach it very differently, right? I mean, some of those tough ones we've had, it's good to have you there.
And just a quick note, just
Yeah.
as I'm hearing what you're saying, so kind of almost as maybe a client or stakeholders of a lot
Yeah.
of people analytics, Sujatha was using affective words, I feel, it seems, it goes. When we tend to think about our job is to get to change people's minds and what they're seeing with the data, but there's so much that was accomplished just with Alan and her working together, making them feel confident. That confidence matters in a lot of cases.
A
more than the
lot,
data.
a lot. And it projects in these rooms because I'm there confidently representing sort of that DEI space and saying, it's okay. This is a good space. These are good decisions. These are things that Alan has sort of vetted and looked. So that confidence in data is somehow permeates into this and makes people feel much more confident that we're not just throwing things at the thing and making these decisions, and that we're going to, again, put our company at risk in some way. Laws are laws, rules are rules. We have to follow all of those. But it just gives you space to have really good conversations. And there is a real power in, both of us showing up. There's power in that.
Yeah.
People see that.
So just one quick note. So I think exactly what you're explaining, or that's what we have as well. So that really close partnership, and that's how we're driving action. So without that trust, and we just got each other's back, and we can be like, oh, our CHRO just did, can you just, and that kind of very informal, very natural. Like without that type of relationship with our other COEs, like we're not driving those actions. And then again, for me, we've also worked in some areas where there was nobody like really picking up with us. We really quickly kind of was, okay, that we can't really get anything done in this area. Let's move our energy here instead, right? So I think that's really the way to get things done, which is what we want to do. We want to make differences and not just be cool slides.
Yeah.
You need that flywheel to pick up the pace, right? That's what it's all about.
No, really good discussion. We've got just over 3 minutes, so we've probably got time for at least one question. There's a couple at the front here. Everyone who sits here asks questions.
So I like when you said diversity or DEI is not just representation.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, Christina, when you talked about Danfo's focus on not just diversity, but the equity part of it. But there's also the inclusivity. Can you speak to how you, either through data or your partnership, been able to push across people that have a narrow view of what DEI is, or people that have a negative view of or derogatory of DEI. That's just a DEI. Like, how have you been able to convince or push through those that have such narrow or negative view of what DEI is?
Do you want to start and pick it up?
Go ahead.
I was going to have one answer because then we might
yes.
get second question. So one of you take this and then...
Okay, and we can absolutely catch up after this as well. I think inclusion is the secret sauce, right? We all know this. It's all wonderful. You can have incredibly diverse organizations. You can have equitable policies in place. You can have equity across the firm in behavior and culture. But if inclusion isn't there, none of this is going to work. So for us, we really focus, again, taking a data-informed approach. We've started doing ours are called people resource groups, like your employee resource groups. It's a great opportunity for us to really bring people, because we're global and we're spread out literally 40,000 across the globe. That's one place where I've seen the most traction. We also have a very strong corporate responsibility, again, partnership. We realized very quickly that DEI just floating by itself, corporate responsibility, our volunteerism, all of that floating by itself, will not have the kind of power. So we have sort of brought it in as CR and DEI. We have one CR and DEI officer. So we have one person who's my boss, Anato Hanlon. And we've started moving in that sustainability angle. So how do you look at our organization as a sustainable living, breathing organization that we are pushing apart, right? And I think for us, that inclusion piece has really been something that, particularly with a lot of the headwinds now, it has been a challenge. I'm not going to lie and say this is easy to do. a global workforce is very difficult to pull under one umbrella. But things like volunteerism, things that bring large groups. I mean, we have, like 14,000 people in India. We've tried to find in little subgroups, how do you find ways to bring those groups together? We still, I think, have challenges with different regions and bringing them to like the mothership and making sure that they feel part of it. But our PRGs, our people resource groups, are a big vehicle for that. And I think that's something we've had success with. But happy to chat offline and tell you other things we are trying, some with success and some with not so much success. Yeah.
Christina, why don't you add to that, because we're not going to have time for another question, if you, or Chris, if you wanted to add to that.
Maybe just one point. So I think really the secret sauce. So we could talk a lot about different things in inclusion, because inclusion maybe isn't just like a quick, but that's what we are. So in the diversity, we're kind of tracking inclusion, right? Because when we see people are leaving us at a higher rate, why is that? Is that because they don't feel included? Is it because they don't feel belonging? So I think all these DE&I, they're complementing each other in different ways. And for me, inclusion really is the secret sauce. It's also the hard one, because it depends, and especially when you're operating globally. We also have a lot of value out of our employee resource groups, which are also a big part of us, but we're doing so many different things in this, and that's where it becomes really complex.
And Chris, if you want a final word, then I think you've got a few seconds.
Yeah, just a quick thought on Flash Native. So I would say a lot of these terms, inclusion, equity, they've gotten challenging recently. And because of those, you have to go back to the philosophy of what we're trying to do. The philosophy of what we're trying to do is have a fairer workplace. And if you think carefully, we've been going at this for as long as IO Psychology has been here. We haven't made the progress we'd like, as Christina shared yesterday. So what I encourage folks to do is have a conceptualization that applies to everybody. Because in most organizations, the minds and hearts you're trying to change tend to be people who look more like me. And we've got to make sure they're on this journey as well. And we want them. So as we think about that, whatever we call it inclusion, that fairness, how do we get back to driving that fair workplace across experiences and opportunities?
Fascinating conversation. I think we probably could have gone on for at least double the time. So Christina, Suj, Alan, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.